Nobody will tell you this directly because it's one of the most uncomfortable rules of the game. From a young age, you were taught to trust, to maintain loyalty, to value those by your side, almost as if it were an absolute virtue. But what if I told you that this belief, the way you learned it, might be keeping you exactly where you are? Worse, it might be being used against you. The truth is that the elite don't operate based on emotional idealism. They understand something that changes everything. Trust isn't a starting point. It's a resource built with control. Machiavelli already made it clear. Effective decisions aren't guided by what should be, but by what really is. And the reality is simple. Those who trust blindly expose themselves. Those who expose themselves too much lose power. Now think about it. How many times have you shared plans, insecurities, or ideas with people who, deep down, were never on the same page as you? How many times has this come back as doubt, demotivation, or even silent sabotage? This doesn't happen by chance. There's a pattern behind it, a pattern that few see, but that's present in practically every relationship. And when you understand this pattern, everything changes. You start to see the game with different eyes. You begin to realize that not all closeness is trust, and not all trust should be granted. This isn't about becoming cold. It's about becoming strategic. And that's exactly what you're going to understand here. A law that isn't taught, but is applied every day by those who truly play at another level. A way of operating where you maintain control, reduce exposure, and stop depending on external validation. It may seem extreme at first, but once you see it, there's no going back. The question is simple. Are you ready to see what's really happening around you? If something inside you awakened while listening, don't ignore that feeling. This channel isn't about videos. It's about memories. Remember who you were before the fear, before the exhaustion, before the silence. Each new video here is a different reflection of your own soul, an invitation to understand what the world never taught you. The power you seek outside has always been within you. If you feel that this journey speaks to what lives silently within you, sign up now. Not to follow yet another creator, but to reconnect with something the world tried to make you forget. Because here, every word was made to heal, each reflection to awaken, and each video serves as a reminder you are not alone on the path back to yourself. Click on subscribe and turn the algorithm into a daily reminder of who you really are. He begins to realize, not abruptly, but as a silent discomfort growing inside him. Conversations no longer make sense. Jokes seem repetitive, the goals too small. It's as if, suddenly, he's seeing the game with a greater level of clarity, and that changes everything. At first, he even tries to adapt, laugh at the same things, agree with the same ideas, but something inside him no longer accepts it. It is at this point that many confuse evolution with arrogance, when in reality it is just a change in perception based on real human nature. And here comes a principle that few dare to admit. Those who evolve inevitably distance themselves. Not by emotional choice, but by strategic incompatibility. Machiavelli already implied this when discussing decisions based on reality, not romantic ideals. Because the truth is simple, although uncomfortable, you cannot grow by maintaining exactly the same environment that keeps you small. And while he still tries to balance the two worlds, he begins to feel the weight of being in places where he no longer belongs, like someone who insists on wearing clothes that clearly no longer fit, and that's when the surrounding behavior begins to change. Those who were once side by side now begin to show subtle resistance, subtle comments, irony disguised as jokes, even that famous "you've changed." And he has changed, but not in the way they accuse him of. He has simply begun to see that politics guided by reality requires choices that are not always comfortable. The group, on the other hand, interprets this change as a threat, because when someone evolves, they expose, even unintentionally, the stagnation of others. And this generates discomfort. It's the famous invisible status imbalance. A practical example of this happens when someone starts investing time in studying, training, building something, while the rest remains stuck in repetitive habits. Little by little, the invitation to go out diminishes, the connection weakens, and he realizes that the closeness was never as solid as it seemed. It was just convenience masked as loyalty. And here comes one of the most ignored ideas. The appearance of virtue often hides invisible interests. Not every friendship is built on mutual growth. Many are built on maintaining standards. At this moment, he faces a silent dilemma. To continue fitting in to maintain acceptance, or to embrace the discomfort of detachment and continue evolving. And this choice defines everything, because the end justifies the means when the goal is real growth. Not in the vulgar, manipulative sense, but in the understanding that strategic decisions require calculated sacrifices. He begins to reduce his presence, observe more, speak less, applying, albeit unconsciously, the calculated use of force, not physical but social. And he notices something curious. The less he seeks validation, the more silent respect begins to emerge. This is virtu and fortuna in action, the combination of personal skill and context. But this is only the beginning, because by distancing himself, he begins to question something even deeper. Was this idea of social loyalty always real? Or is there an invisible structure behind it, designed to keep everyone on the same level? He begins to question something that, until recently, seemed non-negotiable, the idea that a man without friends is a failure. This phrase, repeated almost like a social dogma, has never truly been analyzed, only accepted. But now, with a sharper perception, he begins to see what lies behind it. It's not about friendship, it's about control. A subtle, almost invisible, but extremely effective kind. Because when you believe you need to be constantly surrounded to have value, you become dependent on the group, and dependence is the opposite of power. Machiavelli already pointed out, indirectly, that those who constantly need the approval of others lose the ability to make decisions based on reality. And this is where a delicate point comes in. Loyalty, as sold socially, is often nothing more than an appearance of virtue. Something beautiful on the outside, but empty of strategy. He begins to realize that many relationships are maintained not out of genuine respect, but out of fear of rupture, fear of judgment, fear of being alone. And when he observes more closely, he notices patterns that previously went unnoticed. How many times has someone refrained from making an important decision so as not to displease friends? How many times have career choices, relationships, or even lifestyle choices been shaped by the group? That's not loyalty, that's conditioning. A simple example, the guy who wants to start a business but continues to go out every week with people who mock those who work too hard. Or the one who decides to change habits but is constantly pulled back with phrases like, "Relax, you're exaggerating." That's not support, it's disguised resistance. And here comes one of the most ignored principles of real human nature. People tend to protect the environment where they feel comfortable, even if it limits collective growth. It's not malice, it's instinct. But understanding this completely changes the game. Because from that moment on, he stops interpreting these attitudes as personal and begins to see them as predictable mechanics. And it is at this point that he begins to do something few have the courage to do: redefine the concept of loyalty. No longer as blind adherence, but as strategic alignment. He understands that avoiding being hated doesn't mean submitting. It means acting intelligently, without generating unnecessary conflicts, but also without giving up on his own evolution. He begins to better filter his interactions, to share fewer plans, to observe more than he speaks. And this completely changes the dynamic. Because when you stop exposing yourself emotionally to just anyone, you protect something valuable, your direction. This is the beginning of a more strategic mindset, where decisions are made based on virtù and fortuna, inner skill combined with the right moment. But this raises an even deeper question. If social loyalty is, to a large extent, a fragile construct, then why do some people at the top seem to operate completely differently? There is a hidden pattern there, and it begins to appear when one understands the next law. He begins to notice something curious. Those who truly advance aren't always surrounded. On the contrary, they are often alone, not out of rejection, but by strategic choice. While most associate isolation with weakness, the silent elite see it as an advantage, because isolation isn't the absence of connection, it's access control, and that completely changes how they operate. Machiavelli, in analyzing power, already implied that decisions based on real human nature require emotional distance to be executed accurately. When you are too immersed in the group, you lose clarity. You react more than you think, and whoever reacts loses the game. He begins to realize that true advancement requires moments of retreat, not as escape, but as repositioning. It is in silence that he organizes ideas, evaluates movements, and better understands the scenario. And this is something most avoid, because silence confronts. It doesn't distract, it reveals. And when he looks deeper, he realizes that strategic isolation is a recurring pattern in high-performing individuals. It's not a coincidence, it's a method. Think of someone who is building something big, be it a business, a career, or even a personal transformation. This person naturally reduces external stimuli, decreases superficial interactions, and focuses on execution. This is the calculated use of force applied to one's own attention. Because attention is a resource, and poorly distributed resources generate mediocre results. A practical example. Someone who decides to study 2 hours a day, train their body, develop skills, will inevitably have less time for constant social interactions. And this creates estrangement within the group. But here's the key point. Those who understand the game don't trade focus for acceptance. They understand that the end justifies the means when the goal is consistent evolution. And more than that, they learn to deal with the discomfort of not being understood in the process. And it is at this moment that he begins to operate on another level. He stops seeking constant presence and starts valuing selective presence. Not every environment deserves his energy. Not every person deserves access to his ideas. This is not arrogance. It's strategy. It's the construction of a system where he controls who enters, what he shares, and when he appears. And the more he applies this, the more he notices an interesting pattern. The less available he is, the more valued he becomes. This is virtù and fortuna acting together, the ability to position oneself combined with the correct timing. But this isolation also reveals something uncomfortable. When he distances himself, he begins to see how certain groups react to someone's evolution. And this reaction follows a pattern as predictable as it is dangerous, almost like an automatic mechanism, something that pulls any attempt at growth back to the original level. He begins to realize that it's not just about distancing himself. It's about how the environment reacts when someone tries to leave. There's an almost automatic pattern, silent, but extremely effective. When a crab tries to leave the bucket, the others pull it back. Not through conscious strategy, but through collective instinct. And the same happens with social groups. When someone starts to evolve, to rise above the average, to seek something greater, the group reacts, not with support, but with disguised resistance. Comments like, "You're different, this won't work, you're getting cocky," start to emerge. And the most dangerous part, often they come in a joking tone. But make no mistake, this is a calculated use of force at a psychological level. Not to elevate, but to keep everything exactly as it is, because individual growth threatens the collective balance. The more he observes, the more he realizes that this reaction follows three main weapons: ridicule, guilt, and nostalgia. First, ridicule. They make fun of the new habits, the new ambitions, the discipline. Then, guilt. "You're not the same anymore. You forgot about us." And finally, nostalgia. Constant reminders of the past, as if the old me were more acceptable. This is no coincidence. It's a mechanism of social containment based on real human nature, because groups don't necessarily want what's best for you. They want stability. And stability often means keeping everyone on the same level. A clear example: the guy who decides to stop going out every weekend to focus on a project. In a short time, the insistent invitations begin, the provocations, even that classic "once won't hurt." It seems innocent, but it's the system pulling back. And here comes one of Machiavelli's most brutal lessons. It's better to be feared than loved. Not in the literal sense, but in the understanding that respect comes more from consistency than from approval. And it is at this point that he needs to make a silent decision. Either he yields to maintain acceptance, or he withstands the pressure and continues to evolve. Because the truth is that avoiding being hated doesn't mean avoiding discomfort. It means knowing how to deal with it without losing direction. He begins to understand that he doesn't need to confront directly, just not react. He reduces his presence, ignores provocations, maintains focus. This is politics guided by reality, not by emotional ideals. He doesn't need to prove anything, just keep moving forward. And the more he stands firm, the more the system begins to fail. Because the crab protocol only works when there is a reaction. Without reaction, there is no control. But this leads to an even deeper realization. If the group reacts like this, then how many of these relationships were truly built by conscious choice? Or were most never based on vision, only on proximity? He begins to mentally revisit his own relationships, and something no longer fits. When he analyzes them coldly, he realizes that most friendships weren't born from deep alignment. They were born from circumstance: school, work, neighborhood, routine. People who were in the same place at the same time, and that was enough to create a bond. But a bond isn't synonymous with a shared vision, and that's the point that changes everything. Because when life starts demanding more strategic decisions based on real human nature, this difference becomes evident. While he begins to think about growth, discipline, building something bigger, many around him still operate on autopilot. And that's not judgment, it's an observation. Machiavelli already made it clear that effective decisions need to consider reality, not the idealization of relationships. And the reality is simple: proximity doesn't guarantee compatibility. And when he looks closer, he notices signs that have always been there. Conversations that never evolve, goals that never align, interests that diverge more and more. And yet, for a long time, he maintained these relationships out of a misinterpreted sense of loyalty, because there's a silent belief that old friendships must be maintained. But is that really true? Or is this just another appearance of virtue that masks the fear of breaking patterns? A practical example: two people who grew up together, but one decides to study, invest, build something, while the other remains stuck in the same habits from years ago. In the beginning, the connection still exists, but over time, misalignment becomes inevitable, and maintaining this relationship requires effort, not naturalness. This is a clear sign that the foundation was never vision, it was convenience, and convenience doesn't sustain growth. And it's at this point that he begins to do something few do honestly, reassess who truly makes sense to keep around, not with emotion, but with strategy. He understands that avoiding being hated doesn't mean keeping everyone close. It means acting intelligently by making necessary cuts. He begins to mentally classify who adds value, who drains, who is neutral. And this completely changes the game, because now he is no longer guided by length of time spent together, but by alignment of direction. This is virtue applied to relationships, the ability to act with clarity, even when emotionally uncomfortable. And the more he does this, the more he perceives something even more sensitive. Some people not only don't add value, but they observe, absorb, and use information strategically. And this raises a question that few consider: who should really have access to his life? He begins to realize that proximity isn't just emotional, it's informational. Every person who has access to you inevitably collects data: your weaknesses, your patterns, your ambitions, your moments of vulnerability. And the most interesting thing, most give away this information for free in seemingly innocent conversations. But those who understand the game know information is power. Machiavelli already pointed out that decisions based on real human nature require caution about who is observing you closely, because not everyone who listens to help. Some listen to gauge, others to use at the right moment. And this doesn't mean paranoia, it means strategic awareness. He begins to understand that it's not about shutting down completely, but about controlling the flow. What you say, to whom you say it, and when you say it. Because the more predictable you are, the easier it is to be manipulated, influenced, or neutralized. And when he starts applying this, he realizes how much he was exposed without even noticing. Comments about future plans, insecurities, frustrations, all of that becomes material. And the problem isn't just the direct use of this information, but the indirect impact. People start adjusting their behavior based on what they know about you. A practical example: someone who knows you're afraid of failing can subtly reinforce doubts, or someone who knows your ambition can try to demotivate you with realistic arguments. This is reality-driven politics happening at a micro level. And here comes a silent principle: whoever controls the information controls the surrounding environment. Therefore, he starts operating with more reserve. He shares fewer plans before execution, talks less about weaknesses with those who haven't demonstrated proven loyalty, observes more than he exposes. This isn't coldness, it's strategy. It's the calculated use of force applied to communication. The more he restricts access, the more he notices a curious effect. Some people naturally distance themselves, because many relationships depend precisely on this unrestricted access. Without it, the connection loses its function. And this reveals who was truly there out of alignment and who was there out of convenience or self-interest. He understands then that avoiding being hated doesn't mean being transparent with everyone. It means being intelligent about what to show. He begins to build a kind of layers around himself where few reach the deepest level. This is virtue in action, mastery over oneself and the environment. But this control also brings an inevitable consequence. The less you depend on external validation, the less you fit into the collective pattern. And it is at this point that a new type of operation emerges, a way of existing that doesn't need constant approval. Something that few understand, but many try to label. He begins to realize that he no longer needs to perform to belong. That constant need for validation, to be accepted, approved, included, simply loses its power. Not because he has become cold or distant, but because he has finally understood the game. The so-called Sigma man is not someone isolated by rejection, but by strategic choice. He operates outside the traditional social hierarchy. He doesn't compete for attention, doesn't seek approval, doesn't engage in unnecessary disputes. This is politics guided by reality, not by ideals. While many are still trapped in the logic of being seen to have value, he understands that real value doesn't need to be announced. It imposes itself over time, and here comes a crucial point. It's better to be feared than loved, in the psychological sense. Because silent respect comes from consistency, not from trying to please. He doesn't need to convince anyone, he simply executes. And this completely changes how he interacts with the world. He speaks less, observes more, reacts less, acts with precision. This is the calculated use of force in its most refined form, not wasting energy on petty conflicts, not exposing himself unnecessarily, not engaging in games that don't add value. A practical example of this is someone who stops arguing about opinions in groups, stops trying to prove his point, and starts investing that energy in building something concrete. While others debate, he executes. While others seek immediate recognition, he works in silence, and this behavior generates a curious effect. Initially, he is underestimated. Then, he begins to be observed. And finally, respected. This is virtu and fortuna operating together, inner skill combined with the right timing of exposure. He doesn't rush the process. He understands that consistency beats empty visibility. But this kind of stance also requires maturity. Because operating without external validation means dealing with moments of doubt, silence, and even incomprehension. Not everyone will understand. Some will label it arrogance, others coldness. But he no longer guides himself by these interpretations. He understands that decisions based on real human nature require detachment from the opinions of others. And this brings freedom, but also responsibility. Because now, each choice depends exclusively on him. Without applause, without constant reinforcement, just clarity and execution. And it is at this point that many freeze. Because it is not enough to understand the concept, it is necessary to apply it. And applying it requires method. It's not about disappearing impulsively. It's about knowing exactly how to reduce your presence, reorganize access, and reposition your life without creating unnecessary noise. There is a way to do this, and whoever understands this protocol completely changes level. He understands that clarity is useless without method. Impulsive distancing generates conflict, wear and tear, and even loss of positioning. Strategic distancing, on the other hand, is silent, calculated, and effective. It's not about disappearing overnight, but about intelligently reorganizing access. He starts with something simple but powerful: classification. Not everyone occupies the same level in your life, and treating everyone as equals is a strategic error. He mentally divides them into 3 groups: high access, few, extremely aligned; medium access, functional coexistence without depth; and low access, minimal or no presence. This is policy guided by reality, not by emotional ideals, because the truth is that time and energy are limited resources, and distributing them equally is wasting potential. Machiavelli already showed that effective decisions require differentiation, not uniform treatment. And here, this applies directly to relationships. After that, he begins to apply the most underestimated principle of the social game: gradual reduction. No abrupt cuts, arguments, or unnecessary explanations. He simply starts to decrease the frequency. He responds less, appears less, participates less, and observes. Because people's reactions say much more than any speech. Some will try to pull him back insistently, others will show discomfort, and some simply disappear, and that's exactly what he wants to see. Those who respect his space stay. Those who demand constant access reveal dependence. A practical example, someone who used to go out every week starts going out once a month, without warning, without elaborate justification, just a change in behavior. This is the calculated use of force applied to presence. Because you don't need to confront to reposition, you just need to adjust the pattern, and those who don't adapt to the new pattern automatically drift away. And throughout this process, he learns something essential. Avoiding being hated doesn't mean pleasing others. It means acting without generating unnecessary noise. He doesn't engage in conflicts, doesn't over-explain, doesn't try to convince anyone. He simply follows his path. This is virtue in action, emotional control combined with strategic clarity. And the more he applies this, the more he feels something that was previously rare: space. Mental space, emotional space, space for execution. And this space begins to be filled by something different, no longer by distractions or external demands, but by focus. A type of focus that only exists when the noise diminishes. And it is in this silence that something begins to happen. Something that most fear, but that few learn to use to their advantage. Solitude ceases to be absence and begins to transform into a tool. He realizes that solitude, which previously seemed like emptiness, begins to behave like fertile ground. At first, it's uncomfortable. The silence is unsettling. The absence of stimuli weighs heavily. The mind tries to find distractions at any cost. But little by little, he understands something that changes the game. Solitude is not a lack, it's space. And space, well used, transforms into power. While many flee from this by filling every minute with social media, conversations, or distractions, he does the opposite. He sustains the silence, because it is there that clarity appears. Machiavelli, when speaking about decisions based on reality, already pointed out that those who do not observe themselves are easily manipulated by their environment. And solitude offers exactly that: observation without interference. He begins to see his own patterns, habits, repetitive thoughts, things that previously went unnoticed amidst the noise, and this gives him something rare: self-awareness. And with this awareness, he begins to better direct his energy. The time that was previously spent trying to maintain superficial connections is now invested in building, study, training, skill development. And here's a practical point. He doesn't just stay alone. He uses this time intentionally. It could be learning something new, like strategic reading, books like Machiavelli's The Prince or Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, developing a skill that generates value, or even structuring a personal project. This is the calculated use of force applied to time, because time without direction is wasted, but focused time becomes a competitive advantage. A simple example: 2 hours a day, every day, dedicated to something specific. In months, this generates a result that most cannot match. And while others seek external validation, he builds something internal, something solid. And the more he delves into this process, the more he notices an interesting effect. He stops feeling the need to be surrounded all the time. Not because he has become indifferent, but because now he understands the value of his own time. He begins to choose better when to socialize, with whom and why. This is virtue and fortuna operating in balance. Inner mastery aligned with the right moment for exposure. He doesn't reject the world, he just doesn't depend on it. And this independence changes everything, because now he no longer needs approval to act. He no longer needs company to feel complete. But this also brings an inevitable consequence. When you evolve to this level, you begin to realize that some people only recognize who you were, not who you have become. And that's where the last barrier arises, the most silent of all, the one that keeps many people trapped in the past. He begins to understand something that, at first, seems almost wrong, but which, over time, reveals itself as inevitable. Not everyone will keep up with his evolution, and that's okay. The problem is that for a long time, he believed he owed eternal loyalty to those who were part of his story, as if growing up meant abandoning, betraying, or forgetting. But this is one of the greatest social distortions ever normalized, because loyalty isn't about remaining the same, it's about acting with respect while moving forward. Machiavelli already indicated, even indirectly, that decisions based on real human nature require emotional detachment when necessary. And here comes a hard but liberating point. You don't owe your current version to those who only validate your old version. And the more he accepts this, the lighter the process becomes. There is no more guilt, only clarity. And when he looks back, he realizes how many times he limited himself to fit into environments that no longer made sense. How many times he diminished his ambitions, softened his behavior, avoided growing too much so as not to cause discomfort. This is not humility, it's disguised self-sabotage. And here comes an essential principle. Avoiding being hated doesn't mean diminishing oneself. It means growing without the need for confrontation. He doesn't need to prove anything, nor justify his evolution. Just keep going. A practical example of this is when someone decides to completely change direction, career, habits, mindset, and realizes that certain people begin to distance themselves or criticize. The natural reaction would be to try to explain, to convince. But those who understand the game do differently. They simply continue, because the end justifies the means when the goal is to become who you truly need to be. And that requires silent courage, and it is at this point that he reaches a new level of awareness. He understands that some connections were important, but are no longer necessary. He respects the past, but doesn't cling to it. This is virtue in its purest form, acting with firmness, even when emotionally challenging. And the more he internalizes this, the more he realizes that real growth isn't just about gaining things. It's about leaving things behind. People, habits, environments, old versions of himself. And that's not loss, it's evolution. Because in the end, those who truly grow understand that politics guided by reality, not ideals, demands choices that few are willing to make. And those who make those choices inevitably stand out. Now everything is clear, the pattern has been revealed, the method has been shown, and the next step no longer depends on understanding, it depends on decision. Now the question is no longer whether this makes sense. The question is, what are you going to do with this? Because understanding the game and continuing to play the same way is, ultimately, choosing to remain in the same place. You've seen how distancing works, how loyalty can be used as control, how isolation can become an advantage, how groups pull you back, how access to your life can be exploited, and above all, how all of this connects in a single logic: decisions based on real human nature. Now there are no more comfortable excuses. Either you start applying this strategically, or you accept the consequences of remaining too accessible, too predictable, too exposed. So let me challenge you directly. Who has access to your life today that they shouldn't? What conversations are you still having that are leading you nowhere? What environments do you still stay in just to avoid discomfort? And more importantly, are you willing to maintain the silence necessary to grow, or do you still need the noise of validation to feel safe? These answers say much more about your future than any beautiful plan you might have. Because in the end, the game isn't about intention, it's about positioning, and positioning requires action. If this resonated with you, then don't let this become just another piece of content you consumed and forgot about. Start small, but start today. Reduce access. Observe another reaction. Remain silent where you would previously have spoken too much. Test, adjust, evolve. And if you want to continue learning this type of strategy, unfiltered, unromanticized, straight to the point, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because here you don't learn what's comfortable, you learn what works.